Visalia, California, September 9, 1975. Visalia was a quiet, nostalgic Central Valley town nestled between wide stretches of farmland and the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. With a population of just under 40,000, it retained a close-knit, small-town feel. Its tree-lined streets, modest downtown, and surrounding orchards gave it a sleepy charm, where neighbors knew each other by name, and kids still rode bikes through the neighborhoods until dusk. The late summer sun cast long golden rays through the trees in the Snelling family's backyard. 16-year-old Elizabeth sat on her bed in a room still dressed in the pastels of her childhood, thumbing idly through a magazine she wasn't reading. Her thoughts were elsewhere, floating, restless. School had started, but she felt distant from it, from her friends, even from herself. She couldn't name the feeling exactly, just a low buzz beneath her ribs. A sense of change, maybe. Downstairs, her father, Claude, was at the kitchen table, quietly working on an article for the college paper. His routine was comforting, familiar as he drank his morning coffee. He was always the steady force in her life, his calm presence, a comfort in the chaos of adolescence. A journalism professor at the local college, Claude, had always preferred observation over commentary, steady presence over noise. To his students, he was insightful and fair. To his children, he was a quiet anchor. September 10th, 1975. Claude taught his morning classes at the College of the Sequoias and came home just after 4 p.m. Elizabeth skipped cheer practice that afternoon. She needed a moment of solitude, a break from the chaos of high school. She walked around downtown Visalia, a camera slung over her shoulder, capturing the everyday scenes of the town she knew so well. She'd picked up photography that summer, something she'd quietly grown to love. It helped her notice things. It was something she shared with her father, a love for documenting life, for noticing the little details that made a place unique. That evening, as they ate dinner, Claude watched her with quiet intensity. She was more pensive than usual, eyes flickering toward the windows. He thought of all the years he'd spent trying to teach her how to think for herself, how to move through the world with curiosity and care. The long hikes and walks sharing life together. And now, he realized, came the harder part, letting her try. After dinner, they sat together for a while in the living room, he with a book, she flipping through her photo prints from the week. Neither spoke much. She gave a faint smile and looked up at him. There was something she wanted to say, maybe something she couldn't quite put into words, a kind of dread that wasn't based on anything tangible, just a heavy feeling. She finally put her photos down and asked if everything would be okay. Everyone in Visalia had heard about the recent home burglaries. Elizabeth was feeling a little worried their house may be next. Claude looked at her for a moment, then closed his book. He told Elizabeth that it would be okay. Everything would be just fine. He didn't say it with dramatic flair or promise too much. It was just the kind of reassurance Claude gave. Steady, believable. When she got up to go to bed, she paused at the bottom of the stairs. She told him she loved him and thanked him for always being there. She smiled and faded into her bedroom. September 11th, 1975. The night descended on the Snelling house, and conversation had long since gone quiet. Outside, the wind had stilled. The crickets had stopped. Even the moon, soft and high in the sky, seemed reluctant to cast its light through the trees that edged the backyard. Elizabeth couldn't sleep again. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her fingers tangled in her bedsheet. Her mind buzzed with questions that had no words, only feelings. Something inside her continued to tug at her mind, and she didn't know why. At one point, she swung her legs out from the bed and stood barefoot on the cool hardwood. She walked slowly toward her window, gazing out into the backyard. Everything was still, but the stillness didn't soothe her. Claude's eyes opened slightly. He wasn't sure what caused him to awaken. He hadn't heard a sound exactly, not at first. What woke him was more subtle, an instinct, deep and undeniable. He sat up from bed and moved quietly, careful not to wake his wife, Arlene, who slept beside him. He slipped on his robe from the foot of the bed, moved toward the bedroom door, the floor creaking under his feet. As he moved through the door, the floor creaked again, but the rest of the house stayed silent. Then, there it was, a faint click, the sound of a door latch opening. His stomach sank. He turned toward the kitchen, eyes narrowing, body tense. And then he saw him through the open door in the kitchen, a man in a ski mask looming in the shadows by the carport, a gun in his hand. A second figure stood just in front of him, Elizabeth. She was frozen, her arms trembling at her sides. The fear shone on her face as the man whispered threats in her ear. Claude stepped forward from the hallway. The masked man turned sharply. Claude didn't flinch. He didn't say a word. He didn't plead. He simply stepped between the threat and his daughter, the way he had since the day she was born. The man fired. The first shot hit Claude just below the collarbone. His body jerked back. The second came half a second later, striking lower, near the ribs. He crumpled to the floor, one hand reaching out toward Elizabeth. Elizabeth screamed a raw, high-pitched animal screech that came from deep in her throat. She dropped to her knees beside him. Claude struggled to breathe. His chest was rising in short, uneven bursts. His blood was warm beneath her hands, soaking through her nightshirt. In his eyes there was pain, but beneath it, peace. The kind that only comes from doing what you were meant to do. His mouth moved slightly, then his eyes closed. Sacramento, California, April 2018. The rain tapped steadily against the windows of the Sacramento Police Department's cold case unit, a rhythmic pulse that filled the quiet. Inside, Detective Sarah Mitchell stood alone, silhouetted by the warm glow of a desk lamp. Before her loomed a sprawling investigation board that consumed nearly an entire wall. It was a chaotic yet precise constellation of crime scene photos, old newspaper clippings, maps, and names, all connected by taut red string. She had studied the board 1,000 times. Every pinned photo, every report, every marked location. Victims' faces looked back at her, some smiling, some grainy from age, all of them frozen in time. At the center of the web was an unnamed blank photo. For decades, he had been a ghost, a shadow slipping through California's past without a name or face. Sarah's gaze fell on an old newspaper clipping from 1977. Rapist strikes again. Beside it, pinned slightly askew, was a photo from a double homicide in Ventura County, nearly 400 miles south. She had always known, deep down, that they were connected. The patterns were too precise, the rage too specific. The office door opened quietly behind her, and Detective Luis Vega stepped inside. He held a manila folder in one hand and wore an expression that seemed caught between disbelief and awe. Her breath caught. She stepped away from the board, eyes locked on the folder he now opened, revealing several printed documents. He laid them out on the desk. The DNA profile from a tissue, weeks before FBI and genealogists revealed a possible match to Sarah's case. They took a rape kit from a 1978 attack and was able to match it through a family tree. Sarah stared at the sheet, her hand trembling slightly. Decades of terror unraveled by a discarded tissue in a public database. He slid a printed report across the desk. The DNA profile from the tissue matched the multiple killer and rapist's DNA. Exactly. She turned slowly back to the board. For years, the faces on that wall had demanded answers. Now they had one. She pinned a final photo onto the board, a mugshot, the photo of Joseph James D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer. Not the monster she had imagined. But Sarah knew the truth. Monsters didn't always look the part. Sometimes they wore uniforms. Sometimes they blended in with the rest of the world. Then, with a final thread of red string, she connected the last piece to the earliest pin. 1975, Visalia. Elizabeth carried her father's memory with her. He had been the steady presence in her life, the one constant she had always relied on. And though the grief never fully left her, she found strength in the quiet bravery of the man who had never hesitated to protect her, even when it meant sacrificing everything.
I could never imagine that the man who had been stalking me and peering in my bedroom window during the previous months would end up changing my life forever. My dad lay at the front door, bleeding to death. And ended up dying on the way to the hospital. My dad died saving my life that night, and he is my hero.